the bride who came with a borrowed face. The woman who stepped down from the stagecoach was not the woman in the photograph, and Rusk knew it before she spoke his name. For 3 long seconds, the whole street of Mercy Falls seemed to hold its breath. The blacksmith stopped hammering. 2 boys by the water trough quit laughing. Even the tired horses stood quiet, their leather traces creaking in the cold wind. Caleb stood beside his dun horse with one gloved hand closed around a folded letter. In that letter was a small picture of a slim, fair-haired woman with soft eyes and a mouth made for smiling. But the woman standing before him was tall, broad in the shoulders, dark-haired and plain in a way the world had never been kind enough to forgive. Her brown dress was travel-stained. Dust clung to the hem. One sleeve had torn near the cuff, and her hands gripped a battered carpetbag so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. A second bag sat at her feet, tied with rope. Beside it rested a long wooden case, old but carefully polished. She looked at Caleb like a person, waiting for a door to close in her face. "Mr. Rusk," she asked. Her voice was steady, but her lower lip trembled once before she pressed it still. Caleb looked down at the photograph again. Then he looked back at her. He had lived alone high in the Bitterroot foothills for almost 19 years. He knew the shape of a lie when it walked into daylight. Men lied about cards. Women lied about age. Merchants lied about flour. Preachers lied about mercy. But this lie had ridden 8 days in a stagecoach, and now stood in front of him with tired eyes and a heart already braced for shame. "You are not the woman in this picture," he said. "No, sir," she answered. A man outside the saloon laughed under his breath. Caleb's eyes moved once toward him, cold and hard. The laugh died quick. The woman swallowed. "My name is Nora Bell. The picture was of my cousin Ruth. She passed last winter." Caleb said nothing. Nora's face colored, but she did not look away. That was the first thing he noticed about her. Shame bent her shoulders, but it did not break her eyes. "I sent her picture because I knew no man would send for me if he saw the truth first," she said. "That was wrong. I know it. I have thought on it every mile from Ohio to here." The wind lifted a strand of her dark hair from beneath her bonnet. She tucked it back with a hand that shook. "If you want to leave me in town, I will not blame you. I can wash floors, cook in a boarding house, mend shirts, or carry water. I will not beg. I only ask that you do not make sport of me in the street." That last line struck Caleb harder than the lie. He had expected fear, maybe tears, maybe excuses. He had not expected dignity. He had not expected a woman who could stand in a strange town in front of strangers and ask only not to be humiliated. He folded the photograph and put it inside his coat. "How old are you?" 31. "You can cook?" "Yes." "Read?" "Yes." "Work hard?" Nora's mouth tightened. "I have done little else." "Can you ride?" "No, sir." A faint look crossed Caleb's face. It was not quite disappointment. It was closer to tired acceptance. "The cabin is a day and a half from here if the weather holds," he said. "There is no road after Miller's Creek, only trail." Nora blinked. "Then you are not sending me back." Caleb looked toward the stagecoach. The driver was already unloading a mail sack. The passengers had begun to drift away, bored now that the worst of the scene had not happened. "I did not ride down from my mountain to return with an empty saddle," he said. Her breath caught. "But hear me clear," Caleb added. "I do not like being lied to." "I know. And I do not give my trust twice to a person who breaks it once." Nora lowered her eyes, and for a moment she looked smaller than she was. "Then I will earn what I have not been given." Caleb studied her. The words were simple, but they had weight. He had known many people who wanted forgiveness without labor. This woman seemed ready for labor without promise. He turned and lifted her carpetbag as if it weighed nothing. "Bring the case." Nora bent for the wooden case. "What is in it?" he asked. "A fiddle." "You play?" "My father taught me before he forgot how to be gentle." Caleb paused just slightly. Then he tied her bag to the pack horse and said no more. The ride out of Mercy Falls began under a copper-colored sky. Nora sat behind Caleb on the dun horse, stiff as a fence post, both hands gripping the back of the saddle. He had told her to hold on to him, but she had refused at first, her face red with embarrassment. After the first steep rise, the horse shifted hard beneath them, and Nora grabbed his coat with both hands. Caleb said nothing. He only slowed the horse a little. The town disappeared behind them. The last chimney smoke thinned into evening air. Ahead stretched brown hills, pine shadows, and mountains with snow on their teeth. Nora had never seen land so empty. By the third hour her back ached. By the fifth her legs burned. By sundown every part of her felt bruised. Still she did not complain. Caleb noticed that too. He noticed the way she bit the inside of her cheek when the trail turned rough. He noticed how she whispered a prayer when the horse crossed a narrow ridge. He noticed that she kept one hand close to the fiddle case tied beside her, as if it held the last good thing from another life. They camped near a creek under a stand of pines. Caleb made a small fire and gave her coffee in a tin cup. Nora held it with both hands, warming her fingers. "I can pay you back," she said quietly. "For what?" "For the trouble I caused." Caleb poked the fire with a stick. Sparks rose and vanished into the dark. "Trouble comes whether folks invite it or not." Nora looked across the fire at him. His beard hid much of his face, but not the scar that ran from his left cheek to the edge of his jaw. His eyes were gray, tired, and guarded, like windows in a house no one had entered for years. "Why did you send for a bride?" she asked. Caleb's hand stopped. The creek moved softly over stones. Somewhere in the trees, a horse stamped at the cold ground. After a long while, he said, "Because one morning I spoke to my coffee pot and waited for it to answer." Nora did not laugh. That made him look up. She held his gaze with a sadness that felt familiar. "I used to talk to the chair across from mine at supper." The fire snapped between them. For the first time since she stepped off the stagecoach, Caleb's face changed. Not much, just a small shift around the eyes, a crack in the wall. Then a branch broke in the darkness beyond the horses. Caleb rose so fast Nora barely saw him move. His rifle was in his hands before she could stand. The horses lifted their heads, nervous and still. Nora clutched the tin cup against her chest. From the black trees came another sound. Not wind. Not water. A slow footstep in the leaves. Caleb did not turn around when he spoke. "Get behind me, Miss Bell." And in that moment, Nora understood the mountain had not even begun to test her. The footstep came again, slow and heavy, just beyond the firelight. Nora stood frozen behind Caleb, the tin cup still held against her chest. The coffee inside had gone cold, but she could not move enough to set it down. The dark between the trees seemed deeper than any dark she had ever known. In Ohio, night still held lamps in windows, wagon wheels on roads, voices beyond walls. Out here, night had no edges. It swallowed sound and gave back only what it wanted. Caleb kept his rifle steady. "Whoever is there," he called, "step into the light with empty hands." For a moment, nothing answered. Then a man came from between the pines. He was thin, bent by cold, with a dirty blanket wrapped around his shoulders. A gray hat shaded most of his face. His beard hung in patches, and one boot dragged slightly behind the other. His hands were raised, but his eyes moved fast over the camp, counting the horse, the bags, the rifle, Nora. "Didn't mean harm," the man said. "Saw the fire." Caleb did not lower the gun. "Keep walking." The man gave a weak smile. "That ain't neighborly." This ain't a neighborhood." Nora heard the steel in Caleb's voice and understood that this was not the voice he had used with her. This was colder, older. It came from some place in him that had once learned not to hesitate. The stranger's eyes slid toward her. "You got a woman with you, Rusk." Caleb's shoulders changed, only a little but enough for Nora to see it. He knew this man. "Move on, Amos." The name made the stranger's smile widen. "So you do remember me." "I remember enough." Amos took one small step closer to the fire. "I've been hungry 2 days." "There's jerky in that sack by the stump," Caleb said. "Take 1 piece and go." Amos looked offended. "1 piece." "One." Nora watched the man's hand lower toward the sack. He bent slowly, but his eyes stayed on Caleb. The air felt tight. Even the horses had gone still. Amos took a strip of dried meat, then another. Caleb cocked the rifle. Amos froze. "1," Caleb repeated. The stranger's face twisted. For one sharp second, Nora thought he would jump for the gun or rush the fire. Instead, he let the second piece fall back into the sack. "You always were a mean soul," Amos said. "No," Caleb answered. "I used to be a trusting one." Amos laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. "That was a long time ago." "Long enough for me to learn." The 2 men stared at one another across the fire. Nora did not know what stood between them, but she felt it as surely as she felt the cold. It was not just dislike. It was history. Bitter history, buried but not dead. At last Amos backed into the trees, chewing the jerky. "Watch that mountain, Rusk. Winter brings more than snow." Then he was gone. Caleb stood still for several breaths before he lowered the rifle. He listened until even the dragging bootstep faded away. Only then did he turn back to the fire. Nora's hands were shaking now. "Who was he?" she asked. "A man best left behind." "That is not an answer." "It is the only one I have tonight." Caleb sat down, but he did not relax. He placed the rifle across his knees and kept his eyes on the trees. Nora sank onto the blanket near the fire. The cup rattled faintly in her hands, and she hated the sound. She hated that fear had made her body betray her. "I should have known better than to ask," she said quietly. Caleb looked at her then. "No," he said, "you asked a fair thing. But you will not tell me." "Not yet." Those 2 words were strange. Not yet. They were not a locked door. They were a door with someone standing behind it, unsure whether to open. Nora nodded and looked into the flames. She did not sleep much that night. Caleb did not sleep at all. Every time she opened her eyes, he was sitting with his back against a tree, rifle in hand, watching the dark. Once near dawn, she saw his face in the low red firelight. He looked tired beyond ordinary tired, not from the ride, not from the cold. It was the kind of tired that came when a man had carried old trouble so long, he had forgotten what his shoulders felt like without it. By morning, frost silvered the grass. Nora's dress was stiff at the hem, and her legs ached so badly she could barely stand. Caleb gave her coffee and a hard biscuit without comment. She ate because there was no pride in fainting on a mountain trail. They rode before the sun cleared the ridge. The land grew rougher with every mile. The trail climbed through dark pine, crossed narrow streams, and wound along steep slopes where loose stones slid beneath the horses' hooves. Nora held tight to Caleb's coat, no longer ashamed. Shame seemed useless in country where one wrong lean could send a person tumbling into a ravine. Near midday, snow began to fall. Not much at first, just a few white flakes drifting through the trees. Nora lifted her face and watched them vanish on her sleeve. Back home, snow had meant church bells, wet streets, and children making tracks in muddy yards. Here, the flakes looked like warnings. Caleb noticed her looking. "Early snow," he said, "won't hold long." "Does it get worse?" "Yes." How much worse? He did not answer right away. Worse enough that you should learn fast. Nora looked ahead at the narrow trail. Then I will. He glanced back once, as if he had expected complaint and found iron instead. They reached the cabin in the last gray light of evening. It stood in a clearing beneath tall pines, smaller than Nora had pictured and lonelier than she had feared. Its roof was patched with cedar shakes. Smoke darkened the stone chimney. A woodpile leaned under a shed roof. Beyond it stood a small barn, a chicken pen with no chickens in it, and a line of mountains rising like cold walls around the sky. "This is home," Caleb said. Nora slid from the horse and nearly fell. Caleb caught her by the elbow before her knees gave out. His hand was strong, but he let go as soon as she was steady, as if afraid of taking more than she had offered. The cabin door groaned when he opened it. Inside was one room, a bed in the corner, a table, 2 chairs, a stove, a shelf of tin plates, pegs on the wall, a braided rug worn thin near the hearth. Everything was clean, but there was no softness in it. No flowers, no curtains, no picture, no sign that laughter had ever stayed there. Nora looked at the single bed. Caleb saw. "You take it," he said. "Where will you sleep?" "Barn. It is cold. I have slept in colder." She turned to him. "Mr. Rusk, I lied to get here, I know that, but I did not come to drive you out of your own bed. You came under an agreement. No husband's claim until marriage, no touching without welcome. My roof does not change my word." Nora stared at him. Her throat tightened in a way she did not expect. She had known churchmen who spoke kindly and acted cruelly. She had known respectable men who opened doors in public and closed fists in private. Yet this hard mountain man, who had every reason to be angry, stood in his own poor cabin and handed her the only bed because a promise mattered to him. "Thank you," she whispered. He looked away, uncomfortable with gratitude. "There is beans in the crock, flour in the barrel, coffee by the stove. Eat if you're hungry." Then he took his bedroll and left. Nora stood alone in the cabin. For a while she did not move. The quiet pressed in around her, but it was different from the quiet outside. This one held a fire, a roof, a bed given freely, and a man who had not mocked her when he had every chance. She set her fiddle case beside the wall and touched the lid with 2 fingers. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, covered her mouth, and wept without making a sound. Not because she had lost everything. Because, for the first time in years, she was afraid she had found something she could lose. At dawn, Nora woke to chopping. She opened the door and saw Caleb near the woodpile, swinging an axe in the pale morning light. His coat was off, his shirt sleeves rolled, and each strike split the logs clean. Snow dusted his hair and shoulders, but he worked as if cold was only a small thing to be ignored. He looked up, "You ready to learn?" Nora stepped into the doorway with sore legs, swollen eyes, and a heart that still felt bruised. "Yes," she said. Caleb handed her a smaller axe. By the time the sun rose above the trees, her palms were burning. By noon, the first blister opened. By afternoon, her arms trembled so badly she could barely lift the tool. Still, she swung again. The log split crooked, but it split. Caleb looked at the 2 pieces on the ground, then at her. "That counts," he said. It was not praise exactly, but to Nora it felt close. She smiled before she could stop herself. Then the barn door banged hard in the wind, though there was no wind at all. Caleb turned toward it. A second later, the horses began to scream. The scream of a horse is a sound no person forgets once they hear it. Nora dropped the axe. Caleb was already moving, rifle in one hand, his boots cutting through the thin snow as he ran toward the barn. The horses thrashed inside so hard the walls shook. One kicked the lower door, and the plank cracked with a sound like a pistol shot. "Stay back," Caleb ordered. Nora did not. She grabbed the axe again, though her hands burned around the handle, and followed him across the yard. Her heart beat so hard she felt it in her throat. The barn door hung half open, moving slowly on its hinges. Inside, the air smelled of hay, sweat, and fear. Caleb stopped at the threshold. Nora saw it then. A mountain lion crouched on the beam above the stalls, its pale eyes fixed on the horses below. Its tail moved once, slow and silent. The dun horse pulled against his rope, wild with terror. The pack mare had already broken one slat and was trying to climb over the stall gate. Caleb raised the rifle, but the lion shifted behind the beam. "Can't get a clean shot," he muttered. "What do we do?" Nora whispered. "Get the horses calm before one breaks a leg." The lion hissed. Nora's blood went cold. Caleb moved to the left, trying to draw its eyes. "When I say, open that side gate." Nora looked toward the small gate at the back of the barn. It led to a fenced patch behind the building. The latch was rusty. The path to it passed directly beneath the beam. "Mr. Rusk," she said. "Do it slow, do not run." Every part of her wanted to refuse. Every part of her wanted to step backward into the open yard and say she was not made for this place. But then the pack mare screamed again, and something inside Nora answered that fear with its own stubborn flame. She moved. One step, then another. The lion's head turned toward her. Caleb made a sharp sound through his teeth and shifted closer, drawing its gaze back. Nora reached the gate. Her fingers fumbled with the latch. It would not lift. The iron was stiff with cold. "Hurry," Caleb said, still calm but tighter now. "I am trying." The latch stuck. Nora pulled harder. Pain shot through her blistered palms. She bit back a cry and pulled again. The latch sprang free. She shoved the gate open. At the same moment, the dun horse broke loose. The horse slammed into the stall gate and burst into the center aisle. The mountain lion leapt down. Caleb fired, not at the animal but at the dirt near its paws. The shot exploded inside the barn. The lion twisted away, snarling, and sprang toward the open back gate. Nora pressed herself flat against the wall as it passed so close. She felt the wind of its body against her skirt. Then it was gone. The horses bolted into the fenced patch, snorting and trembling, their breath steaming in the cold air. Caleb stood in the barn doorway with smoke curling from his rifle barrel. Nora still held the gate post, her knees weak beneath her. For a while neither spoke. Then Caleb turned to her. "You should have stayed back." Nora almost laughed, though there was no humor in her. "You told me to open the gate. I also told you not to run into danger." "I walked." His mouth tightened, but his eyes were searching her face. "You were scared." "Yes." "You did it anyway." "Yes." The word came out small, but it did not bend. Caleb lowered the rifle. That is the only kind of courage there is. Nora looked down at her hands. Blood had seeped through the bandage on one palm where the latch had torn the blister open. She tried to close her fingers, but they shook too badly. Caleb saw. "Come inside." "It is nothing." "It is blood, that makes it something." He took the axe from her gently and led her back to the cabin. The warmth hit her first, then the smell of coffee, ashes, and old wood. Caleb pulled a small box from beneath the table and opened it. Clean cloth, salve, a needle, thread, a brown bottle with no label. "Sit." Nora sat. He knelt in front of her and unwrapped the bandage. His face changed when he saw her palm, not much, but enough. He looked almost angry. "I told you yesterday to stop when it hurt. You also told me winter kills the unprepared. That does not mean ruin your hands the first morning." Nora stared at the top of his bent head while he cleaned the torn skin. His touch was careful, almost too careful for a man with such scarred hands. She had expected him to be rough with everything, because the world had been rough with him. But Caleb Rusk handled pain like he respected it. The liquid burned. Nora drew in a sharp breath. "Sorry," he said. She blinked. "You apologized to wounds too. To people I hurt. You did not hurt me. I still dislike being the reason you hurt." Something in her chest pulled tight. He wrapped her palm with clean cloth, winding the bandage around her hand with slow, neat turns. Outside, the horses had quieted. The mountain wind brushed against the cabin walls. The world felt large and dangerous, but inside the small room, for that brief moment, there was only the sound of his hands working and her breath trying not to tremble. "Am I useless?" she asked before she could stop herself. Caleb's hands paused. Nora wished the words back, but they had already crossed the room and stood between them. "I cannot ride. I cannot shoot. I barely split one log. I opened one gate and nearly fell apart from it." He looked up at her then. His gray eyes were steady. "You crossed half a country alone after telling a lie you knew might leave you stranded. You faced a mountain cat with an axe and bad hands. You are sitting here bleeding and worrying whether you are useful." He tied the bandage off. "No, Miss Bell, useless is not the word I would choose." Nora looked away quickly, because her eyes had filled, and she did not want him to see how badly kindness could undo her. For those who have ever felt judged before being truly known, stay with Nora's journey, because the mountain is only beginning to show what kind of woman she really is. That evening, Caleb repaired the broken stall while Nora made supper. She had found beans, dried onions, cornmeal, and a small piece of salt pork. By the time he came in, tired and smelling of cold air and sawdust, a thick stew simmered on the stove and corn cakes warmed near the fire. He stopped just inside the door. Nora turned, suddenly unsure. "It is not fancy." Caleb hung his hat on the peg. "I did not ask for fancy." They ate at the table in silence at first. Caleb took one spoonful, then another. Then he slowed, as if realizing he had forgotten to hide his hunger. "This is good," he said. Nora smiled into her bowl. That almost sounded like praise. It was praise. "Oh." He looked uncomfortable, as if praise was a language he knew but had not spoken in many years. After supper, Nora washed the plates while Caleb checked the rifle. The room settled into a quiet that did not feel as sharp as before. Her fiddle case stood near the bed, and she looked at it more than once. Caleb noticed, "You can play if you want." Nora dried her hands on a towel. "It may bother you." "Noise bothers me. Music is different." She opened the case. The fiddle was old, dark at the edges, with a small crack near the chin rest. She touched it like it was alive. When she set bow to string, the first note wavered. Then another followed, soft and low. The tune was one her mother used to hum while kneading bread, gentle enough to make a hard room remember it had once been part of a tree. Caleb sat by the fire and did not move. His face went still but not cold. Something in him seemed to loosen, one careful thread at a time. Nora played until the fire burned low. When the last note faded, Caleb stared into the coals. "My sister played piano," he said. Nora lowered the fiddle. It was the first piece of himself he had given without being asked. "What was her name?" she said softly. Caleb opened his mouth to answer. Then a sharp knock struck the cabin door. Not wind, not branch, not mistake. 3 hard knocks. Caleb rose with the rifle. And from outside, Amos called, "Open up, Rusk. I found something in the snow you are going to want to see." Caleb did not open the door right away. He stood with the rifle held low, eyes fixed on the wooden latch as if the planks themselves might lie to him. Nora remained by the table with the fiddle still in her hand, the last note of her song gone cold in the air. Outside, Amos knocked again. "I know you hear me," he called. "Ain't come for your beans this time." Caleb moved close to the door but kept his body to one side. "Say what you came to say." "Found tracks below Miller's Creek. Wagon tracks, fresh. Then I found something else." Caleb's jaw tightened. Nora set the fiddle down carefully. "What does he mean?" Caleb did not answer her. "Hold it up to the window." There was a pause. Boots scraped on the hard ground outside. Then something pressed against the frosted glass. Nora stepped closer before Caleb could stop her. It was a piece of cloth. Blue cloth. Her breath left her. She knew that fabric. She had sewn the same blue ribbon inside one of her travel bags to mark it as hers. During the long ride from Ohio, the bag had torn at the corner. She had mended it at a station house by candlelight, using that exact cloth. "That is mine," she whispered. Caleb looked back at her. "You sure?" "Yes." His eyes moved to the door again. "Where did you find it, Amos?" "Half a mile east of the split trail," Amos said. "Caught on thornbrush, tracks beside it. 2 riders, maybe 3. They came up after you passed." Nora's skin went cold. Caleb lifted the latch and pulled the door open only wide enough to aim through it. Amos stood outside with both hands raised. Snow clung to his hat and shoulders. The blue strip of cloth dangled between his fingers. "Throw it in," Caleb said. Amos tossed the cloth. It landed near Caleb's boot. "Now back up." Amos gave a bitter smile, still charming as a grave. "Back up." The man obeyed, though slowly. Caleb opened the door wider and stepped onto the porch. Nora stayed behind him, but she could see Amos clearly now. He looked worse than he had at the camp. His cheeks were hollow, his lips cracked, and one side of his coat hung torn near the pocket. "You followed us?" Caleb asked. "I followed the smoke from your chimney. Figured it was better than sleeping under a tree." "You said tracks followed our trail." "They did." "Who?" Amos shrugged, didn't stop to ask their names. Caleb stared at him. The humor left Amos's face. One rode a gray horse with a broken left shoe. Another had a mule. Third set of prints were light, could have been a smaller horse, could have been a man walking partway. "Town men." "Maybe." "Or yours." Amos's eyes hardened. "If they were mine, I would not be standing here warning you." Caleb held his gaze for a long moment. The old anger between them stood in the snow like a third man. Nora stepped forward. "Did they see the cabin?" Both men looked at her. Amos's expression changed in a way she did not like. Not cruel exactly, but knowing. "Not yet, ma'am. If they had, I reckon they would already be knocking less polite than me." Caleb lowered the rifle a little. "Why bring this here?" Amos laughed once, dry and sharp. "Because I may be hungry and I may be low, but I ain't so low I let strangers creep toward a woman's roof without saying so." Nora heard the words carefully. A woman's roof. Not Caleb's, not the hermit's, hers. It was a small thing, but after years of having no place named as hers, the phrase settled deep. Caleb looked toward the dark trees. The snow had begun again, thin flakes turning in the wind. Tracks would fade by morning. Whoever had followed them had chosen their time well. "Come in," Caleb said. Nora looked at him in surprise. Amos did too. "What?" "You heard me," Caleb said. "You can warm yourself by the stove. You touch anything that is not handed to you, I put you outside. You speak wrong to her, I put you under the ground." Amos lifted his hands again. "Fair welcome." "There is nothing fair about it." He stepped inside slowly. The cabin seemed smaller with another man in it. Amos smelled of wet wool, old smoke, and road dust. He kept his eyes down at first, but Nora saw how quickly he took in everything. The bed, the rifle, the food stores, her fiddle. The second chair pulled close to the table. Caleb pointed to the stool by the stove. "Sit there." Amos sat. Nora ladled stew into a bowl. Caleb gave her a look. She met it with one of her own. "He warned us. He may still be lying. Then he can lie with a warm stomach." Amos took the bowl from her with both hands. For all his roughness, he did not forget to say, "Thank you, ma'am." Nora nodded. Caleb barred the door and shuttered the window. Then he set his rifle across the table and sat where he could see Amos and the entrance both. No one spoke while Amos ate. He did not eat like a greedy man. He ate like a starving one trying to remember manners. Nora noticed his hands. The knuckles were swollen and one fingernail was black. Beneath the grime, there were old rope scars around his wrists. "Who are they?" Nora asked at last. Caleb said, "We do not know." But Amos looked at her over the bowl. "Might be from the stage line, might be from town, might be someone who knew you were coming." Nora's fingers closed around the edge of the table. No one knew except the agency. "And whoever read the mail," Amos said. Caleb's eyes sharpened. "What are you saying?" "I am saying a woman traveling west alone with bags and a fiddle case gets noticed. A man like you riding down after 19 years gets noticed too. Folks talk. Bad folks listen." Nora felt foolish then. She had thought her lie was the danger. She had thought Caleb's rejection was the worst thing waiting for her. She had not considered that the whole journey itself had placed a mark on her back. Caleb stood. "I will check the lower trail." "No," Nora said. He turned. The word had come out before she measured it, but she did not take it back. "It is dark. Snow is falling. If men are out there, they want you away from this cabin." Amos gave a low whistle. "She has sense." Caleb ignored him. "I need to know how close they are." "And I need you alive," Nora said. The room went silent. She felt heat rise in her face, but she did not look away. Caleb's expression changed just slightly, as if the words had struck a place in him he did not show to daylight. At last he said, "Then we wait until first light." He moved to the wall and handed Nora a small revolver. It looked heavy in his palm. Her stomach tightened. "I do not know how to use that." "You will by morning." "I thought you said first light." "I said we wait to track them. I did not say we sleep." Amos leaned back on the stool. "Well, this ought to be a cheerful night." Caleb gave him a cold look. "You will sleep with your hands where I can see them. Wouldn't dream otherwise." Nora took the revolver. The metal was cold, heavier than she expected. It felt wrong in her hand, but the world outside the cabin had already stopped caring what felt right. Caleb came around behind her, careful not to touch more than he needed. He showed her how to hold it, how to brace her wrist, how to thumb back the hammer without shaking. His voice was low and steady by her ear. "This is not for anger," he said. "Not for pride, not for proving anything, only for the moment there is no other choice." Nora nodded. Outside, somewhere beyond the shuttered window, a horse snorted. "Not their horses." Caleb froze. Amos stood so fast the stool scraped the floor. Then came a sound from the trees. A man's voice faint through the snow. "Rusk, we know she is in there." The voice outside did not sound angry. That made it worse. It came soft through the snow, patient and sure, like a man calling from a church doorway instead of from the dark woods around a lonely cabin. "Rusk," the man called again. "No need for trouble. Send the woman out and we will ride on." Nora felt the revolver grow heavier in her hand. Caleb stepped to the shuttered window but did not open it. His face had gone still in that dangerous way she had already learned to fear. Not fear for herself, fear for whoever stood against him. Amos whispered, "3 of them, maybe 4. Caleb did not look back. "You saw them." "I heard 2 horses. That voice makes 3, could be one holding back." Nora's throat tightened. Why would they want me? No one answered. That silence told her more than comfort would have. Caleb moved to the lamp and turned the flame low until the cabin sank into dim orange shadows. He motioned for Nora to step away from the window. She obeyed, though every part of her wanted to look out and see the shape of the threat with her own eyes. The voice came again. Woman, you listening? We know you came in on the stage. We know you carried a case. We know you ain't married proper yet. There are men who pay well for women with no kin and no law standing beside them. Nora went cold from head to foot. Caleb's hand closed tighter around his rifle. Amos muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse and a prayer mixed together. The man outside laughed lightly. Now, Rusk, do not make this into some grand, brave thing. You never cared much for people. No reason to start now. Nora looked at Caleb. She saw something pass across his face, quick as lightning behind clouds. Shame, old shame. The kind a person does not choose but carries because others put it there. Do not listen to him, she whispered. Caleb's eyes stayed on the door. I am not. But she was not sure that was true. Outside, another man spoke, rougher than the first. We can burn you out. Amos stiffened. Caleb raised one hand, telling everyone to stay still. If they wanted to burn us out, they would have done it before talking, he said quietly. They are testing. For what? Nora asked. For fear. The answer sat heavy in the room. Nora looked at the stove, the table, the bed in the corner, the fiddle case near the wall. This place had frightened her when she first entered it. One room, one lonely bed, one man with too many secrets. But now, with strangers outside trying to claim her like lost property, the cabin felt like the only honest place left in the world. The voice called again. Last offer, send her out. Caleb finally answered. She is not yours to take. She yours then. Caleb paused. Nora felt that pause like a hand around her heart, not because she doubted him, but because she understood the trap. If he said no, they would call her unprotected. If he said yes, it would make her sound owned. Either way, men were trying to decide what she was without asking her. Before Caleb could speak, Nora stepped toward the door. He turned sharply, no. But Nora lifted the revolver with both hands and faced the door, not opening it, not touching the latch. I belong to myself, she called, her voice shaking but clear, and I am not coming out. The wind pressed snow against the walls. For a moment, no one outside spoke. Then the soft-voiced man laughed. That one has spirit. Caleb looked at Nora. Something in his expression had changed. It was not surprise exactly. It was respect settling deeper. Amos gave a small nod from beside the stove. Good answer, ma'am. A shot cracked outside. The bullet struck the cabin wall near the window and buried itself in the wood. Nora flinched, but she did not scream. Caleb moved fast, pulling her down behind the table. Amos dropped beside the stove. Stay low, Caleb said. Another shot hit the roof. Snow slid from the eaves. Caleb crawled to the side window, lifted the edge of the shutter just enough to see, then fired once into the trees. Not wild, not panicked. A warning shot, hard and clean. A horse reared outside. A man cursed. Silence followed. Nora's ears rang. Her palms ached around the revolver. Caleb reached over and gently pressed the barrel lower. Finger off the trigger unless you mean it. She nodded, breathing fast. I do not want to hurt anyone, she whispered. I know. But I will not be dragged away. His eyes met hers in the dim light. I know that too. The words steadied her more than she expected. Outside, the men shifted position. Branches cracked under boots. Caleb listened, head tilted. Amos crawled to the back wall and took the old shotgun Caleb had kept above the pegs. Caleb looked at him. That loaded. Would be foolish if it was. It is mine. Then I will try not to waste your shells. A strange thing happened then. Even with danger outside, Nora almost smiled. These two men clearly had a past full of bitterness, yet here they were, shoulder to shoulder, because the danger at the door was worse than whatever lay behind them. The soft voice came again, but farther back now. This is foolish, Rusk. Snow is coming hard. We can wait longer than you can. Caleb's mouth tightened. The horses, she whispered. Caleb looked at her. If they scare the horses loose, we cannot leave, and if they get into the barn, they can use it for cover. Amos swore softly. She is right. Caleb looked toward the back door. There is a narrow way from the kitchen wall to the barn. Woodpile shields half of it. I can go, Amos said. No. You need to stay here with her. Caleb's face hardened. I do not trust you behind me. Amos flinched as if struck, but he did not argue at first. Then he said, quieter, I earned that, but those men out there are not waiting for your trust to heal. The room went still. Nora saw Caleb's jaw work. She did not know what Amos had done to him, but she knew what it cost Caleb to hand even a piece of faith to someone who had broken it once. Finally, Caleb took a ring of keys from his pocket and tossed them to Amos. Barn lock is the small brass one. If you run, keep running. If you turn on us, I will know. Amos caught the keys. Fair. No, Caleb said. Nothing about you is fair. Amos lowered his eyes. For once he had no answer. He slipped out the back door into the snow. Nora stayed crouched behind the table, listening to every sound. A soft crunch, a pause, wind, another crunch, then the distant creak of the barn latch. No shot came. She let out a breath. Caleb looked at her hands. You are bleeding again. Nora glanced down. Red had seeped through the bandage around her palm. It can wait. No, he said softly. It can't, but it has to. That tenderness, spoken in the middle of danger, nearly broke her more than fear had. If this moment touches your heart, stay with the story, because sometimes the strongest people are the ones who are terrified and still refuse to be taken. Then a shout rose from the barn. Amos! Caleb lunged toward the back door, but before he reached it, the front latch lifted from the outside. Someone had a key. And Nora suddenly remembered her missing travel bag. The latch rose slowly. Nora's eyes fixed on it, her mind racing faster than her breath. The missing travel bag, the blue ribbon, the men following their trail. Somewhere along the way, one of them had taken more than cloth. They had taken the small ring of spare keys Caleb kept wrapped in oilskin near the feed pouch. Caleb saw the latch move and lunged. The door burst open before he reached it. A man stepped in with a pistol raised, snow on his shoulders and a grin on his face. He was narrow-eyed and young, with a red scarf at his throat. Behind him stood another shadow, larger, holding a shotgun pointed toward the room. Easy now, the young man said. Nobody needs to be heroic. Caleb stopped, rifle half raised. Put it down, Rusk. Nora could hear Amos shouting somewhere outside near the barn, but the wind tore the words apart. Caleb's eyes moved once toward the back door, then back to the pistol. The young man smiled wider. That's right, think careful. Nora stood behind the table, both hands around the revolver Caleb had given her. The barrel shook. She hated that it shook. She hated that the man could see it. His eyes slid to her. There she is. The way he said it made her skin crawl. Not like she was a person, like she was a package finally found. Caleb's voice came low. You take one more step toward her, you will not leave this cabin. The man laughed. You ain't in a position to promise much. The larger man behind him shoved the door open wider and stepped inside. Cold wind swept through the room, sending ash across the hearth. Nora's fiddle case rattled where it leaned against the wall. The sound drew the young man's eyes. "There it is," he said. "Fiddle case, told you she had one." Nora's grip tightened. "That belongs to me." "Not for long." Caleb's gaze sharpened. This was never about her. The young man shrugged. "It is about whatever brings money, woman alone, goods, maybe a mountain man's furs, maybe coin hidden under floorboards. Folks get careless when they think no one is watching." Nora felt a cold clarity settle over her fear. These men had not come because they knew her. They had come because the world had taught them a woman without family was easy prey. Her borrowed photograph had not caused their wickedness. It had only brought her to a place where wickedness had followed. "Step away from the table," the young man said to her. "No." His grin faded. Caleb spoke without looking at her. "Nora." She knew what he meant. Be careful. Do not test a loaded gun. But she also knew that if she stepped away, the table would no longer stand between her and them. "No," she said again, softer but firmer. The large man cocked the shotgun. Then the barn gun fired outside. The blast cracked through the night like thunder. The young man flinched. Caleb moved. Everything happened in a breath. Caleb swung the rifle stock hard into the young man's wrist. The pistol fired into the ceiling. Nora ducked as splinters rained down. The larger man turned toward Caleb, but Nora lifted her revolver with both hands and aimed at the floor near his boots. She fired. The shot struck the plank at his feet. He stumbled back with a curse, more startled than hurt. Caleb drove his shoulder into the young man, slamming him against the doorframe. The pistol fell. Nora kicked it under the stove as hard as she could. The large man raised the shotgun again. A shape burst through the back door. Amos came in covered in snow, one side of his face bleeding. Caleb's old shotgun clutched in his hands. "Drop it," Amos shouted. The large man froze. Caleb pressed the young man to the wall with one arm across his throat. "Do as he says." For a second, the cabin held only breath and firelight. Then the large man let the shotgun fall. Amos moved forward and kicked it away. Smart choice. The young man struggled once. Caleb pressed harder until he stopped. "Who sent you?" Caleb asked. "Nobody." Caleb's face was stone. "Try again." The young man's eyes flicked toward Amos, then Nora, then the door. "Nobody sent us," he gasped. "We saw her in Mercy Falls. Driver said she had no kin. Heard she was bound for your place. Figured you were too old and too alone to stop us." "Too old, too alone." Nora saw the words strike Caleb, though his face did not show it. She knew what they meant. Men like that had counted his solitude as weakness, just as men had counted her plainness as permission to shame her. They had both been measured wrong. Caleb shoved the young man to the floor. Amos tied both intruders with rope from the woodbox, while Caleb kept the rifle trained on them. Nora stood near the table, smoke still curling faintly from the revolver in her hand. Only after the men were bound did her strength leave her. The revolver slipped from her fingers and hit the rug. Caleb was at her side instantly. "Nora." "I fired it," she whispered. "At the floor." "I still fired it." "You saved us time." "I could have hit him." "You did not." Her hands began to shake worse now, all the fear arriving late. Caleb reached for her, then stopped short, asking without words. Nora stepped into him. He wrapped one arm around her shoulders, careful of her bandaged hand. She pressed her forehead to his coat and shut her eyes. He smelled of smoke, snow, and leather. He was solid, alive, still there. "I do not want to become hard," she whispered. Caleb's voice was rough near her hair. Hard is not the same as cruel. She held on to that. Amos stood by the door, pretending not to watch. But when Nora looked up, she saw his eyes were wet in the firelight. He turned away quickly. "What happened at the barn?" Caleb asked. "Fourth man," Amos said, "tried to loose the horses. I hit him with the barn shovel, then fired over him when he got up. He ran." Caleb's eyes darkened. "On foot. Likely not far in this snow. We tie these two in the shed until morning, then take them to Mercy Falls." The young man on the floor laughed bitterly. "Sheriff won't care." Caleb looked down at him. "Then I will find someone who does." That answer was quiet, but it carried more danger than a shout. By the time the men were dragged to the shed and locked inside, dawn was beginning to pale the edge of the sky. Snow covered the yard, smoothing over the violence of the night as if the mountain wanted to hide what had happened. Inside the cabin, Nora sat by the stove while Caleb rewrapped her bleeding hand. Amos leaned against the wall, exhausted and silent. Caleb tied the cloth gently. "You did well." Nora looked at him. "You keep saying that when I am frightened." "Because courage without fear is just ignorance." She almost smiled. Amos cleared his throat. "For what it is worth, ma'am, you held steadier than most men I have known." Nora studied him. "Thank you." Caleb did not look pleased to agree with Amos, but he did not deny it. Then Nora noticed something near the door. A folded paper had fallen from the young man's coat during the fight. It lay half under the chair, damp from melted snow. She picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, too neat for a road thief. Her own name was written on it. Nora Bell, traveling west under matrimonial contract. No known family, carrying personal goods. Destination believed to be Rusk cabin north of Mercy Falls. At the bottom was a stamped mark. The same agency that had arranged her journey. Nora lifted her eyes to Caleb. "They did know," she said. And the lie that had brought her west, suddenly, looked smaller than the one waiting behind it. Nora read the paper twice, though every word seemed to grow colder the second time. Her name, her journey, her lack of family, her destination, all written in a careful hand by someone who had known exactly how alone she was. Caleb took the paper from her and held it near the firelight. His face did not change, but Nora saw the muscle tighten in his jaw. Amos leaned closer. "That stamp there, I have seen it before." Caleb looked at him. "Where?" "Mercy Falls Post Office, on letters coming from that bride office back east." Nora's stomach dropped. "The agency." No one argued. The two men locked in the shed had not followed by chance. They had been handed a trail. Someone had written her down like a list of goods. A woman with no father waiting at the station, no brother riding beside her, no husband yet to claim her under law. Just a name, a face they did not even need to know, and a place where she could be found. Caleb folded the paper once, then again with slow care. "We ride to town when the storm breaks." Nora looked at the shuttered window. Morning light had turned the snow pale blue. "And do what?" "Put those men before the sheriff." Amos gave a dry laugh. Caleb's eyes cut to him. Amos lifted both hands. "Maybe Mercy Falls found a better sheriff since I last knew it, but if it is still Sela's crow, he is more fond of warm chairs than hard truth." "Then we make him listen," Caleb said. Nora looked down at her bandaged hand. "What if he does not?" Caleb did not answer fast enough. That was answer enough. They left near noon. The storm had thinned to light flakes, but the world outside lay deep in white. Caleb tied the two captured men to their own horses, hands bound in front but reins held by Amos. The younger one with the red scarf had lost his grin. The larger man kept his eyes on the ground. Nora rode behind Caleb again. This time she did not hold the saddle. She held his coat without shame. The trail was slick, the trees heavy with snow, and every sound seemed muffled, as if the mountain itself were listening. Halfway down the ridge, Caleb stopped. Below them, Mercy Falls sat in the valley like a handful of brown dice tossed into snow. Chimney smoke rose straight into the cold sky. For a moment, no one moved. Nora felt Caleb's back rise and fall beneath her hands. "You dislike going down there," she said quietly. "Yes. Because of people staring. Because people remember pieces and call it the whole truth." She thought of the photograph she had sent, the borrowed face. The first thing he had known of her had been a lie, but not the whole truth. "Then let them look," she said. "We know why we are going." Caleb turned his head slightly, not enough to see her fully. "You make it sound simple." "No, I make it sound necessary." He gave a small breath that might have been almost a laugh, then started down the trail. Mercy Falls changed when they rode in. Doors opened. Curtains moved. Men stepped out of the saloon. The blacksmith rested his hammer on the anvil. Caleb Rusk was already a sight in town, but Caleb Rusk bringing two bound men, with Amos Pike at his side and a May Lorder bride behind him, was enough to pull half the street into silence. Sheriff Silas Crow came out of his office buttoning his coat over his belly. He had a round face, a gray mustache, and eyes that looked annoyed before they looked concerned. "What is this?" he asked. Caleb dismounted. "Attempted kidnapping, trespass, armed threat. They came to my cabin last night." The sheriff looked at the two bound men, then at Nora. His eyes paused on her in a way that made her straighten her back. The younger man spoke fast. "Sheriff, we was only looking for shelter. Rusk near killed us." Caleb stepped toward him. Nora touched Caleb's sleeve. A small touch, but it stopped him. She reached into her coat and handed the folded paper to Sheriff Crow. "This was found on him." The sheriff opened it and read. His expression changed, but only for a second. Then he frowned as if the paper had inconvenienced him. "Where did you get this?" he asked the young man. "Never saw it before." "That is a lie," Nora said. The whole street seemed to hear her. The sheriff looked at her. "Ma'am, best let the men speak." Nora's face warmed, but she did not step back. "I am the one named on that paper." A few men outside the saloon shifted. One laughed softly. Amos turned his head toward them and the laugh died. Sheriff Crow cleared his throat. "Could be a misunderstanding." Caleb's voice lowered. "A bullet in my wall is not a misunderstanding." "Did anyone die?" "No." "Anyone wounded?" "No." "Then I can hold them for disturbing peace and unlawful entry, maybe. But talk of kidnapping needs proof." Nora stared at him. "They said there were men who would pay for me." The sheriff's eyes flicked down the street, then back. "Words are wind unless witnesses stand proper." "I am a witness." "You are also part of the trouble." Caleb moved then, but Amos put a hand against his chest. It was a brave thing or a foolish thing, and Nora could not tell which. Caleb looked down at Amos's hand. Amos slowly removed it. Nora felt something hard settle inside her. She had met this kind of wall before. Men who did not call a woman a liar outright. They only built a fence around her words and called it law. "Then write it down," she said. Sheriff Crow blinked. "What?" "My statement. Write every word. If you will not act, at least leave proof that I spoke before another woman's name appears on such a paper." The street went quieter. Caleb looked at her, and the anger in his face gave way to something deeper. The sheriff did not like it, but too many people were watching now. He folded the paper and motioned toward his office. "Fine, come in." Inside, the office smelled of ink, tobacco, and old wood. Nora gave her statement while Caleb stood behind her chair and Amos waited by the door. She told the truth, not prettied, not softened. She told of the stagecoach, the missing bag, the men outside the cabin, the gunshots, the note. When she finished, Sheriff Crow sanded the ink and set the paper aside. Caleb said, "Now the agency." The sheriff's face tightened. That stamp proves nothing. It proves a trail. It proves paper. Amos spoke from the door. Ask the postmaster. Everyone turned. Amos looked uncomfortable under their attention. He logs incoming agency packets. Always did. Folks like knowing when brides are due. He may have seen who else asked after her letters. Caleb stared at him. Why do you know that? Amos looked at the floor. Because I once asked after a letter that was not mine. The room went still. Caleb's face went white beneath the weathered skin. Nora looked between them. What letter? Amos swallowed. Caleb's sister Lydia, years ago. Caleb stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. Do not say her name. Amos did not lift his head. I took the letter that would have brought her home before the fever season. I thought there was money in it. There was. By the time I put it back, it was too late. Nora felt the room tilt. Caleb's hand curled into a fist at his side, but he did not strike him. That restraint seemed to cost him more than violence would have. My sister died waiting for word, Caleb said. Amos's voice broke. I know. Before anyone could speak again, the office door opened. The postmaster stood there, pale and breathless, holding a sealed envelope. Sheriff, he said, this came on the morning stage. His eyes moved to Nora. It is addressed to Miss Nora Bell. Nora stared at the envelope as if it had teeth. Her name sat across the front in dark ink, clean and careful. Miss Nora Bell, Mercy Falls, Montana Territory, no return address, no friendly mark, no sign of kindness, just her name delivered at the worst possible moment when every old fear in her had already been dragged into daylight. Caleb reached for it first. Nora stopped him with one quiet word, no. He looked down at her hand resting over his wrist. Her fingers were bandaged, swollen, and still trembling, but she did not pull them back. It is addressed to me, she said. Caleb's eyes softened. Then you open it. Sheriff Crow shifted behind his desk. Best do it here with witnesses. For once, Nora agreed with him. She took the envelope from the postmaster. The paper felt thick and expensive, not like the cheap letters she had known back east. She broke the seal with her thumb and unfolded the page. At first the words swam. Then they sharpened. Miss Bell, your arrival in Montana has been confirmed. You have already caused inconvenience by failing to follow the expected path of settlement. You are advised to return any property or money obtained under false representation. Failure to do so may result in legal complaint, public notice of fraud, and removal from your current situation. No signature. Only the same stamped mark from the agency. Nora read it once, then again. Heat crept up her neck, but it was not shame this time. It was anger, slow and deep. Sheriff Crow leaned forward. What does it say? Nora handed it to him. He read it, and his face became harder to read. Not guilty, not innocent. Just a man realizing the matter had grown too large to sweep under the rug without someone noticing the dust. Caleb took the letter next. His eyes moved over the page. When he finished, he folded it with such care that Nora knew he was trying not to tear it in half. They are threatening her, he said. The sheriff cleared his throat. It says false representation. Did you use a false photograph? Nora stood straighter. The room seemed to lean toward her. The postmaster, Amos, Caleb, the sheriff, even the two prisoners outside in the holding cell had gone quiet enough that she could hear the stove ticking in the corner. Yes, Nora said. Sheriff Crow raised his brows, almost pleased to have something simple at last. But Nora was not finished. I sent a photograph that was not mine. I did it because I believed no man would choose me if he saw my face and shape first. That was wrong. I admitted it the moment I stepped off the stage. Mr. Rusk knows it. I know it. God knows it. Her voice shook once, then steadied. But I did not sell myself. I did not steal from anyone. I did not ask those men to follow me. I did not ask an agency to write down my lack of family like an invitation for wolves. If I must answer for my lie, then they must answer for theirs. No one spoke. Then Amos said softly, "Amen to that." Caleb looked at him, not with forgiveness, not yet, but without the old immediate hatred. Sheriff Crow rubbed his mustache. "I can send a wire to Helena. Ask if other complaints have been made." "Do it," Caleb said. The sheriff bristled. "I was speaking to the lady." Nora looked at him. "Do it, please." That please was not weak. It was a command dressed in manners. The sheriff stood, took both papers, and headed toward the telegraph office with the postmaster. Caleb and Nora stepped back into the street, where the cold bit hard after the stale warmth of the office. Mercy Falls was still watching. Nora felt every eye, men near the saloon, women near the mercantile window, a little girl holding her mother's skirt. Their looks carried curiosity, judgment, pity, and a few small sparks of something better. Nora wanted to hide. Instead, she walked beside Caleb with her chin raised. A woman in a brown shawl stepped out from the mercantile doorway. "Miss Bell." Nora stopped. The woman looked about 40, with tired eyes and flour on her sleeve. "My sister came west through an agency in Kansas. We stopped hearing from her after she reached Dakota. Folks said she likely changed her mind about writing." Nora's breath caught. Another woman spoke from the boarding house steps. "My cousin, too, went to Idaho, married, they told us, never got a letter after." The street changed then. It was not loud. No one shouted, but the silence shifted from gossip to unease. Caleb saw it. Nora did too. This was bigger than her, bigger than a borrowed photograph in one lonely cabin on a mountain. There were other women, other names, other letters that had never made it home. If you believe one hidden truth can protect someone else from harm, stay with this story, because Nora's courage is no longer only about saving herself. By evening, the wire came back. Sheriff Crow read it in front of 6 witnesses because Caleb insisted, and Nora did not object. 3 territorial complaints, 2 missing women, 1 fraudulent matrimonial agent suspected of passing travel information to criminal parties, investigation pending. The sheriff's face had lost its lazy softness. "That agency is under watch," he said, "has been for months." Nora sat down on the bench outside the office because her legs suddenly felt weak. Caleb crouched in front of her. "Nora." "I thought I was the shameful one," she whispered. "All this way, I thought the worst wrong in the story was mine." His eyes held hers. "It was. But it began with mine." "No," he said, firmer. "Your lie opened a door. Their wickedness walked through it. Those are not the same." She closed her eyes. No one had ever separated her mistake from her worth before. The 2 captured men were held for transfer to Helena. Sheriff Crow, now eager to appear useful, promised to send statements, the note, the letter, and the prisoners with armed escort. Amos gave his own statement too. He did not look at Caleb while doing it, but when he wrote his name at the bottom, his hand shook. As dusk settled, Caleb prepared to ride back to the cabin. Nora stood near the horses, exhausted down to her bones. Amos approached slowly. "Rusk." Caleb turned. Amos removed his hat. Snow had begun to fall again, catching in his thinning hair. "I cannot undo Lydia." Caleb's face closed. "I know that," Amos continued, "and I am not asking pardon. But if those agency people are tied to missing women, I know old roads, old camps, men who carry rumors cheaper than whiskey. I can help track where the rot leads." Caleb said nothing. Nora watched him wrestle with it. His sister's name stood between them like a grave marker, trusting Amos would not honor Lydia. Refusing help might leave other women lost. Finally, Caleb said, "One betrayal and I end this." Amos nodded, "Fair." "Nothing about this is fair." "No," Amos said, "it ain't." They rode out of Mercy Falls under a darkening sky, 3 riders instead of 2. The trail home was quiet. Nora sat behind Caleb, too tired to speak, but her hands held his coat with a different kind of certainty now. Halfway up the ridge, Caleb stopped. Below, lanterns glowed in town. Above, the cabin waited somewhere in the trees. Between the two lay snow, danger, and a truth that had not finished unfolding. Caleb looked back at Nora. "You still want the mountain?" he asked. Nora looked toward the dark pines. Then she looked at him. "I want the place where I can stand in truth and not be thrown away for it." Caleb's face softened in the last blue light of evening. Before he could answer, a gunshot echoed from the valley behind them. Then the church bell in Mercy Falls began to ring. The church bell rang like a warning from God. Caleb turned the horse hard on the ridge. Nora's arms tightened around his waist as the animal slid in the snow, found its footing, and started back down toward Mercy Falls. Amos was already ahead of them, leaning low over his saddle, his old coat whipping in the wind. Another shot cracked from the valley. Not close enough to strike them, close enough to say the trouble was not over. By the time they reached town, Mercy Falls had spilled into the street. Lanterns swung from trembling hands. Women pulled children behind them. Men stood half-dressed in doorways, holding rifles they looked unsure how to use. The sheriff's office door hung open. Sheriff Crow stood outside with a bleeding cut above his eyebrow, more angry than hurt. The 2 captured men were gone. Caleb dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. "Where are they?" The sheriff wiped blood from his brow with his sleeve. Someone opened the holding cell from outside. "Who?" "I did not see." Amos swung down beside them and looked toward the back alley. "Tracks." "Snow's trampled half to mud," Sheriff Crow said. "Bell rang, folks ran out, everyone stepped everywhere." Caleb's face hardened. "Convenient." The sheriff glared at him, but did not argue. "The letter," she said suddenly. Caleb looked at her. The unsigned letter from the agency, the note from the man's coat. "Where are they?" Sheriff Crow's expression changed. Nora's heart dropped. "Sheriff." "They were on my desk." Caleb moved past him into the office. Nora followed. The desk was a mess of spilled ink, scattered forms, and a knocked-over chair. The 2 papers were gone. So was the written statement Nora had given. For a moment she could not breathe. It felt as if someone had reached into her chest and taken her voice. She had spoken truth. She had put it into words. She had forced men to write it down. Now the papers were gone as if none of it had happened. Caleb stood very still. Amos cursed under his breath. "Someone is cleaning the trail." Nora turned to the sheriff, who knew where the papers were. The sheriff opened his mouth, then closed it. Caleb answered for him. "Everyone in this office." Nora looked toward the open door. The postmaster stood just beyond the threshold, pale in the lantern light. His spectacles sat crooked on his nose. He held his hat in both hands, twisting the brim. Nora remembered how breathless he had been when he brought the envelope. Remembered how he knew the agency stamp. Remembered Amos saying the postmaster logged bride letters and that folks liked knowing when women were due. She took 1 step toward him. "Mr. Tully." The postmaster flinched. Caleb saw it. The whole room seemed to narrow around that small movement. Sheriff Crow turned. "Tully." The postmaster shook his head too quickly. "I only came because of the bell." Nora's voice was quiet. "You knew my letter came. You knew when I was arriving. You knew where I was going." "I know many things. I am the postmaster." You gave that information to someone. No. Caleb stepped forward. Do not lie. Tully backed up until his shoulders touched the doorframe. I did not know what they were doing. The words fell into the room like a broken plate. Sheriff Crow stared at him. What did you say? Tully's face crumpled. I only passed names, arrival dates, destinations, that is all. A man paid for information, said he worked for the agency, said he was confirming arrangements. Nora felt sick. Women went missing. I did not know that. Amos's voice went low. You did not want to know. Tully looked at him with pleading eyes. It was small money. $5 here, 10 there. I have a sick wife. Medicine costs. Nora thought of the women whose families never received letters. She thought of a sister in Dakota, a cousin in Idaho, names carried west and swallowed by silence. Pity tried to rise in her, but anger stood taller. You sold loneliness, she said. You sold women who had no one watching the road behind them. The postmaster covered his face. Sheriff Crow grabbed him by the arm. Who paid you? I do not know his true name. Caleb's voice was sharp. What name? Mr. Vale. He stayed sometimes at the old freight house beyond the church. Tall man, black coat, scar on his right hand. Amos went rigid. Caleb turned to him. You know him. I know the kind of work tied to that name, Amos said. Stage robberies, false contracts. Women moved through camps under made-up marriages. I heard rumors, never had proof. Nora's stomach twisted. The escaped men will go there. Or already have, Caleb said. Sheriff Crow reached for his coat. I will gather men. Caleb caught his arm. No crowd. If Vale hears half the town coming, he runs or takes someone with him. Nora looked at him. Someone. Caleb did not answer. But she understood. If Vale had come to Mercy Falls for papers, he might also want the woman whose name was on them. Sir. Caleb turned to Nora. You stay at the mercantile with Mrs. Hanley. Lock the doors. Do not open for anyone but me. No. His eyes flashed. Nora. No, she repeated. Her voice shook, but she stood firm. I have been carried from one place to another by other people's decisions my whole life. I lied because I thought no man would choose me. I stayed quiet because I thought quiet women survived. But those papers had my name. Those missing women could have had my name. I will not hide while men decide what my truth is worth. Caleb looked pained. This is not about doubting your courage. I know it is about your fear. That struck him silent. Nora stepped closer. And I am afraid too, but I would rather stand frightened beside you than safe somewhere waiting to learn if you came back. Amos looked away, his face tight with something like regret. Sheriff Crow exhaled. She has the right to come if she chooses. Caleb gave the sheriff a look that could have frozen water, but he did not argue. At last, he turned back to Nora. You stay behind me. I will stay where I am useful. His mouth tightened, then slowly he nodded. They moved through the back of town with lanterns covered and weapons low. Snow softened their footsteps. The old freight house stood beyond the church, a long, sagging building with broken shutters and a roof bent under winter. No light showed from the front. But smoke rose from the rear chimney. Caleb raised a hand, and everyone stopped. Voices came from inside. A man laughed. Then another voice spoke, smooth and calm, the same soft voice from outside the cabin. Bring the woman before dawn, he said. If Rusk follows, let him. A lonely man is easiest to break when he thinks he has finally found something to lose. Nora's blood turned cold. Caleb's hand found hers in the dark and held it once, hard and brief. Then a floorboard cracked behind them. Everyone turned. Tully stood in the snow, wild-eyed, holding a lantern high. I am sorry, he shouted toward the freight house. They made me tell. The rear door flew open, and Mr. Vale stepped out with a pistol pointed straight at Nora. Mr. Vale's pistol did not shake. That was the first thing Nora noticed. Not his black coat, not the pale scar crossing his right hand, not even the cold smile that seemed carved into his face. She noticed the steadiness of his gun, because a steady weapon in the hand of a wicked man meant he had done this before. "Miss Bell," Vale said, "you have caused more trouble than you are worth." Caleb stepped in front of her. Vale's smile widened. There he is, the mountain ghost playing husband. "Lower the pistol," Sheriff Crow called. Vale did not look at him. "Sheriff, you are out of your depth." The rear door of the freight house stood open behind him. Lantern lights spilled over the snow, and inside Nora saw shadows moving. The escaped men were there. So were boxes, saddles, travel trunks, and a woman's bonnet hanging from a nail. A small pink bonnet. Nora's breath caught. Vale saw her looking. Sentimental things pile up in this business. Caleb's rifle rose. Nora grabbed his sleeve. "No." His eyes stayed on Vale. "He has a gun on you. And if you fire, everyone fires." The truth of it held him still. Tully stood behind them, trembling, his lantern held high. "I did not know," he whispered again. "I swear I did not know." Vale finally glanced at him. A weak man always swears after he is caught. Something in Tully broke then. He stepped forward, voice cracking through the cold. "The ledger. He keeps a ledger under the floorboards by the stove. Names, payments, routes. I saw it once." Vale's face changed for the first time. "Not much." "Enough." Amos moved before anyone else could. He lunged low through the snow, striking Vale's arm from the side. The pistol fired upward, splintering a roof beam above the freight door. Caleb rushed forward and drove Vale back against the wall, knocking the weapon from his hand. Sheriff Crow and 2 townsmen seized the escaped men inside before they could reach their guns. It was over almost faster than Nora could understand. Vale fought like a cornered animal, but Caleb did not beat him. He did not take revenge. He pinned him hard against the wall and held him there, breathing like a man standing on the edge of an old cliff. Vale laughed, though his mouth was bleeding from where he had struck the timber. "You should have stayed alone, Rusk. Men like you are safer with ghosts." Caleb's face twisted. For a moment, Nora feared the old pain in him would answer. Then Caleb looked back at her. Not at the lie she had brought, not at the fear in her eyes, at her. His grip eased just enough for the sheriff to take Vale in irons. "No," Caleb said quietly, "ghosts do not need protecting anymore. The living do." Inside the freight house, they found the ledger exactly where Tully had said it would be. Beneath a loose board near the stove lay a black book wrapped in oilcloth. Sheriff Crow opened it under lantern light, and the whole room seemed to grow colder. Names, dates, towns, payments. Some names had small marks beside them, some had nothing at all, which somehow felt worse. Nora found her own name halfway down a page. Nora Bell, Ohio, alone, no kin present, transfer pending. She touched the line with one finger. For months she had believed herself unwanted. Now she understood the crueler truth. Men like Vale had seen her not as unwanted, but unguarded. Sheriff Crow removed his hat. Around him, the townspeople stood silent. Mrs. Hanley from the Mercantile began to cry when she recognized her sister's name. Another man sank onto a crate, whispering the name of his cousin like a prayer. Nora closed the ledger. "Send this to Helena." Sheriff Crow nodded. This time there was no laziness in him, no doubt dressed as law. "I will ride with it myself." Tully was taken too, not in chains at first, but he offered his hands for them. "I deserve it," he said. Nora looked at him. "Then tell everything, every name, every letter, every man who paid you." He nodded, tears freezing at the corners of his eyes. "I will." By sunrise, Vale and his men were locked under guard, and Mercy Falls was no longer the same town. People who had once stared at Nora with curiosity now stepped aside with respect. Some could not meet her eyes, ashamed of how quickly they had judged. Others thanked her softly, not with grand words but with touched hats, open doors, and quiet nods. If Nora's courage has stayed with you this far, let it remind you that one voice can make a whole town stop pretending not to hear. Like this story, if you believe truth can be stronger than fear. Amos waited near the church steps as Caleb and Nora prepared to leave. His face was bruised from the struggle, and one arm hung stiff at his side. Caleb stopped before him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Amos reached into his coat and pulled out an old envelope yellowed with age. "I kept it," he said. "Lydia's letter, the one I stole. I do not know why, cowardice maybe, shame. Maybe because I knew one day I would have to hand it back." Caleb took it with a hand that trembled once. "I cannot forgive you today," Caleb said. Amos lowered his head. "I know. But today you helped save living women. That does not balance it." "No," Caleb said, "it does not, but it means you are not finished being a man yet." Amos's eyes filled. He nodded, unable to speak. Caleb tucked the letter inside his coat, near his heart. The ride back to the mountain was quiet. Snow shone under the morning sun, bright and clean over the dark pines. At the ridge, Caleb stopped and looked down at Mercy Falls, then up toward the hidden cabin. Nora sat behind him, her arms around his waist. "You still want that lonely cabin?" he asked. "It is not lonely if we are both there." He turned slightly. "Nora Bell, I sent for a bride because I was tired of silence, but I found a woman who taught me the difference between quiet and peace." Her eyes filled. "I came with a borrowed face," she said. Caleb covered her hands with his. "And stayed with your own." They were married 2 weeks later in the little church at Mercy Falls, not because the town demanded it, not because the law needed to name what they were, but because Caleb asked with Lydia's old letter in his pocket and Nora answered with her whole heart. In spring, curtains hung in the cabin windows. Wildflowers stood in a jar on the table. A fiddle tune often drifted through the pines at dusk, and Caleb Rusk no longer spoke to his coffee pot unless Nora was there to laugh at him for it. Years later, folks would say the mountain changed because of her. But Nora knew the truth. The mountain had not changed. 2 wounded people had simply stopped hiding from the light, and in a small cabin beneath the Montana sky, they built a home strong enough to outlast every winter.